How does a 12-year-old get into heavy drinking and drugs?
So at 12, what happened was my dad had a heart attack and my mom had gotten hepatitis. She was a school teacher in a rough part of town, and she picked up hepatitis. And I watched him go to the hospital, and then I watched her eyes roll up in the back of her head, all within 4 months. And I started to kind of get anxiety. And my sister was 10 years older, so she had already left the house. So, I remember I told one of my friends that, and he said, come on, smoke this joint. You're going to feel better. And what happened was that one weekend, 8 guys on one day, 7 on the next, we all started drinking and drugging. And one of my other neighbors, who was like a year older than me, his mom was an alcoholic, and she committed suicide. So all this happened around the same time the Vietnam War is going on. And right after she committed suicide, the woman across the street, she moved into my friend's house because she had been having an affair with his dad. So within 2 weeks, he had a new mom, and his mom had killed herself. And he started becoming a dealer. He looked just like Charles Manson. It's kind of scary. He grew his hair really long. He had the whole face, and we were like, he started dealing. So we all started dealing. So at the age of 12, we had like a little assembly line after school. And this went on from 12 to, let's say, 16 or 17. Okay. And we would sit in like these little forts that we'd build and just roll joints. And be 12 years old, and I could talk an adult into buying me a bottle of Mad Dog. It's called MD 2020. It was disgusting. I walked across a bonfire one time after drinking a bottle of that.
I'm getting flashbacks. We grew up drinking it too, and
it's
lightning in a bottle.
It's lightning in a bottle. And what it was because I didn't want to feel anything. That's the main issue with addiction. Yes, our brains are different. They've done tons of studies on it. University of Texas believes that what makes us an alcoholic is that we're more sensitive to everything, to light, to hearing, to taste, and definitely emotion. As they say in the rooms of recovery, because there's a kind of a saying, we're the most important piece of shit in the room. That's where our ego goes. And what they discovered was that once 2 addicts or alcoholics start talking, we level off. We become right-sized because we can identify with each other. It's like, both my parents did end up dying within 4 months of each other in 2010, which is ironic that they almost did in 72. My dad was 89 and my mom was still working at 85, and she was killed in a car accident. And grief, very identical to what the commonality is in alcoholism. If you lose your mom and you're talking to someone else who lost their mom, you can identify. Like, I have found comfort from people that have lost parents when I was going through it, and now I'm there for them. It's like your podcast. It really is. You're getting people. My experience is my greatest attribute. I'm older. I've had more experiences. Now it's time to share it with others.
Especially now with all the different vices that people are, nearly everybody is addicted to something in some way, whether they don't want to accept it or not. Obviously, there's worse addictions to have. When you're talking through your story, it's like the easy escape almost. Like, it was better to just lift the bottle or lift a joint than to try and process your feelings. So do you think there was ever a developing stage, or do you think it just went from A to B straight away?
No. I went through therapy, and, they threw me into therapy, and it helped to a certain extent. But in regards to addiction itself, I made a lot of money at the end of my using. I had a big ass job. The problem is that it was helping to pay for my addiction. I tell a story of, and this kind of sums up what addiction is. Once again, a lot of people, whether you're in program or whatever, we deal with OCD. And it's all different levels. So obsessive compulsive disorder, where some people they're washing their hands or they're doing this or whatever. Everybody I know has some form of OCD. So it is this. And what OCD is a solution to anxiety. Believe it or not, it's a paradox. It's like, you have to do this so you don't feel this way. So if you address the anxiety issues, then you don't have to do this. And it's the same thing with drinking and drugging. And that's what I think therapists, how many of them, oh God, I'm actually writing a play called 7 Therapists and Me. And it's not going to be friendly to the therapist, although one of them did kind of help me steer me towards recovery. But I would ask them, and I've asked doctors this at the hospital when they're going to give me a med, like if I broke my shoulder a while back, and when I was sober, I would say to them, "Is this addictive?" Well, why? And then I'd go, "Okay, do you know anything about alcoholism or addiction?" And I swear to God, 3/4 of them looked me right in the eye and said, "No, I don't." Yet they're willing to write a prescription for, for Dilaudid, for Vicodin, for things that are more addictive than alcohol or pot or Coke. It's crazy of what's going on out there. So the story I was going to tell is I remember I was making a lot of money. If I could get home after having 1 beer, I was fine. 2, okay. 3rd beer, and this is at the end of my using, because you have to remember too, addiction is a progressive mental illness. It's a progressive disease. The AMA had already coined it as that it is under that category. So it's not going to just stop at some point. We have to look at what's going to fill that hole in us that keeps getting bigger and bigger. I tried to fill it with money and sex and things and alcohol and drugs to fill that hole. And that's not what fills it. It's a connection from this type of recovery that you have to fill it with something else. It could be being of service. It could be turning your life over to a power greater than yourself. It could be going to church, whatever it is that works for you that fills that hole. So the story, I'm trying to get home. I'm in my car. I've had probably 6, 7, 8 beers, maybe a couple shots, probably smoked a joint, and I had already done some coke or crack, dressed in my little business suit because I had a big ass job. I mean, seriously, I'm not going to mention who I worked for, but I had a big ass job. I never drank at work, never drugged at work, never did any of that, and always got promoted and recruited to other companies. This is when I was doing more corporate America. And I remember being in my car knowing and crying because I couldn't steer the car toward my home. I knew that my addiction had taken a hold of me and was taking me out to get more. And that, could lead to anonymous sex. It could lead to making bad decisions. So and what happened is it created, for lack of a better term, karma. Just, I was in that energy. So even when I was sober, in between using, I saw a 16-year-old boy shot in the head and killed. I had my apartment ransacked. I got held up at knife point at a payphone. Yes, we had payphones. I had an attempting carjacking. Knock on wood, those things don't happen to me in sobriety, right? They just don't. Someone wrote my phone number on a crack house wall. I'm wearing my little business suit. I left there and went, wait a minute. That guy wrote my phone number on his wall in a condemned building, right? That was like, they were gone in a month later. And the guy called me collect. I did not accept the charges, but it was night after night. There's a term that they call it incomprehensible demoralization. That's where we go to. Incomprehensible demoralization. We make bad choices based on fear. Anxiety is driven from fear, and over time of getting clean and sober, I got to meet what I call them God shots. Could be, some people call them coincidences, fate, whatever it is. And I guarantee they were going on when I was using, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. So at the end of my using, I had a partner die of AIDS in 92, and I wore that on my sleeve, and my drinking increased and such. And then, of course, I pulled back again, and then it would increase again. And because I was so successful financially, none of my friends thought I had a problem. I was literally living 2 lives. And then I started blacking out. So if you're blacking out and you're questioning whether or not you're an alcoholic or an addict, normal people do not black out from their drinking or drugging. They just don't. But we're all on our own journey. I heard a guy who was 85 years old. He didn't get sober till he was 75. and said those 10 years had been the best years of his life. So age makes no difference. And I've known people who got sober when they were 16 and they still are today. And they've got the same problems. It's just how we deal with stuff. So the addictive mind is what has to be addressed. And I believe the key is the willingness to stop, or the willingness to listen. Just the willingness. That's all you need, is the willingness. In my case, I was willing, but I couldn't do it. And then on April 18th, 1997, I was struck sober.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what happened.
yeah. When Andy Smith was here, he taught me about a theory called learned helplessness, which is kind of what you were talking about, where it's people who are just used to things going wrong for them. It's like you meet those people that always say that, oh, I have such bad luck or things like that, so they assume the worst and everything. And that's kind of
Yep.
where he was talking about how in some of his addiction groups that people will say their story and he knows straight away that it's linking to it. They think that all these bad things that happen to him, so it's going to happen for the rest of their life. So they just use alcohol to muddy the waters. But there's then this other theory that connects to it, that is the way to get out of it is, it's like, the magician puts you under hypnosis and clicks his fingers in front of your eyes and you wake up. Said you need that thing to wake you up. So the thing that addicts always say is they always point it to one moment that changes it. And I always thought that was so fascinating, because I know that anybody who's got like really bad habits that are kind of slowly destroying their life, they have progressive events that teach them, this is a bad habit, this is where you're going to end up, you need to do something about it. So for you, what was your wake up call?
It was literally the bad karma that was happening. I got thrown out of a bar. I have to say this out loud because it's just funny. I got thrown out of Latino night at Chaps. It's just a funny thing that it just still cracks me up when I say it. I had never been thrown out of a bar in my life, and I got thrown out of that night, and the police and all. It was just a crazy night. That didn't stop me. Okay. It might have delayed me for a while, but my defining moment, and like I just said, I didn't make a conscious decision to stop. I wanted to stop, but April 18th, 1997, and I can't even explain it except for I felt like my will had been taken from me by something. And I went to my doctor and I said to her, Barbara, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get sober, and I don't know how to stop drinking. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't drink at work. I wasn't laying in the gutter. Um, there's all different levels. There's high bottom, medium bottom, and low bottom drunks. I was a medium bottom drunk. I lost my scruples, but I got to keep my furniture. So she would usually laugh at my stories. And I said, no, Barbara, I don't know. I can't laugh anymore. She said, well, Bill, you're carrying around a medical card. You look on the back of it. Maybe there's a rehab. There was a rehab. I'd been carrying it around for like 4 years, and I went into evening rehab. But the defining moment is when I surrendered. And I can only explain my experience with it. To some people, they'd be like, oh, well, how does that happen? I didn't consciously surrender. I woke up April 18th, 1997, and knew I couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't know what to do. So I had to surrender to the unknown and just do the next thing in front of me. And that was, I almost felt like I was divinely guided. You know, Bill Wilson in Alcoholics Anonymous says he had a white light experience. I didn't have that never really had that. I've had different experiences, but it was that moment that I couldn't control this anymore. See, if I think I can control it and everything else, that's where I get into trouble. And I know to people that, people who have grown up in organized religion, some of them are like, oh no, don't want to talk about God. Oh no, I'm not talking about a sky God. I don't believe in, the Bible has great stories and whatever works for you. For me, it was something greater than myself. It's that little small voice in the back of my head needed to get louder to tell me, Bill, stop it. I heard something and I love this. It's by Esther Hicks, who channels Abraham. And so that's a whole other story. The way she puts it, so simple. A belief, just like you were talking about, your friend or whoever would be like, oh, everything bad happens. A belief is a thought, okay, that you keep thinking. That's it. That's all a belief is. It's a thought that you keep thinking. So if you want to change the belief, pick a different thought. And I do believe people who are, oh, woe is me, the universe just gives them more of that because that's who they're announcing that they are. They just keep drawing it to them. And, like worrying accomplishes nothing. Like, what does worry really accomplish? So I had to trust unconditionally and just do the next right thing that was in front of me. I was taught to not say no early on because my best thinking got me into that place. I was driven by money, sex, and power. And I had all three. Not always in the same order, but it was that type of thing that I was driven by, that my success had to look like this, had to be like this. My relationships, boom, boom, boom. I was just feeding the ego the entire time. And that's, I think, a big part of what happens with addicts. It's that our ego is just out of control. And ego stands for ease God out. And don't let the word God scare you. It's just a word. It's not no one's going to, throw a lightning bolt at me anytime soon.
You mentioned the little voice that told you it was almost time to quit, but I'm interested in the following days, weeks, months, years, whatever it may be after that. Was there another little voice that entered the room that was kind of renegotiating against yourself? Or, there's a lot of people that will do if I can just do this slowly and edge it out, then eventually it'll go away. Or was he locked out of the room completely?
No, that ego was right there because that's the ego. And I break it into two groups. There's the ego that wants immediate gratification. And then there's the little voice in the back. And I can only get to the little voice in the back by meditating, prayer, being of service to others. Other than that, the ego's right here, basing everything on the experiences of what I have in front of me. So that little voice, that loud noise in my head was there this weekend. I mean, at 28 years clean and sober, I thought about using this weekend. I was triggered by something. I wasn't as grounded as I should be. So what I had to do is I went to a meeting the next day. I talked about it. Turns out they made me the speaker for the meeting. It was a God shot. There was a guy in the room that had just taken a 6-month chip, that I had been on a Zoom call with me all over COVID and then disappeared and saw me and went, oh my God, Bill, that's a God shot. Coincidence? Maybe, but it's just another word. God shot, fate, coincidence, whatever you want to call it. It happened. So I knew I was in the right place. And what I did is, with how I thought about it this week, because everybody I know who's clean and sober, they have those moments where that voice gets loud again. Bill, you've been doing this so long. You don't have this and this and this, because it's all about that. I need this and this and this. You look on Facebook and everybody's like, look, I'm in Italy. Look, I'm in Australia. What you don't know is that they spent 5 hours in baggage claim and got dysentery. So we're basing our lives on a split second of someone else's life when I'm not living someone else's life. And that's where I have to come back and get grounded. And gratitude, I'm serious. I know this might sound rote. Gratitude-less and gratitude, really embracing it, helps me take that loud voice and make it quiet, and it goes behind the little voice that tells me who I really am. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Oh, never mind. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And the thing, like, I just kept thinking about whenever you were saying that story was, you clearly at that point, even though you had that voice still talking, you made the decision, this is it, now we're going to make a change. And I always think, I always like, go back to this, I've said this so many times in the show, but we all know those people that will say, oh, I'll quit tomorrow, or I'll quit the next day, or on Monday I'm going to start something, I'm going to change my life. And what I'm always interested in about people with, like you, who had strong addictions, who did make the change, Did you tell anybody outright that you were doing it, or was it a case of let's just shut up and get rid of this now?
Oh, that's
Obviously, apart
interesting.
from your meetings.
Yeah, no, I told my close friends that I was doing this, and they were seriously like, why? What's wrong? I was the worst drinker of the group. But what happened is I wouldn't be in front of them. The party would be over. They'd all go home and I'd go back out. So I lived two separate lives. And people were still like, Bill, I can't believe. A couple people knew because I tell them the next morning, listen, I don't even remember how I got home. My car is parked across the street in someone's front lawn. And, and I don't know who this person is sleeping next to me, you know. So it is usually the first words out of my mouth back then were, you got to catch a cab. So I was 50 pounds lighter, but anyway, but it was, it's that type of thing. Does that answer your question? Because I don't know if I heard it correctly. I want to make sure I heard it correctly.
Yeah, that's exactly the lines I wanted.
Okay.
So with that change, I think anybody that's I don't even think you really need to overcome addiction to know this. Anyone that's just changed their habits or their routines or their behaviors will have hit that moment in the changing process where you almost sit and you think, is the outcome of where I'm going now really worth it? Is it better than the life I've walked away from? Did you have that?
Yes, I did when it came to finances in the beginning. I was like, shit, man, I was making a lot of money and I've been very lucky in a lot of ways. Right now is probably one of the most challenging times in my life, but just financially, and I'm working it out. But because I'm sober, I'm working it out. If I was drunk and did pie, I would be living in a tent in probably part of Hollywood. But which is rampant in this town, by the way. It's absolutely horrifying. And I feel so bad for these people because they're not getting the help that they need. But anyway, that's a whole other podcast. Yes, I have. And when I tried to get sober a couple times earlier, I tried to get sober in 1977 when I was 17 years old. I went into a meeting with all these older guys and I watched them drag this old woman in and she was screaming and drunk. And I went right out and bought a 6-pack of Lowenbrow and went out for another 10 years. And then I ended up getting hepatitis myself. I was at a party, a barbecue, and a guy made chicken salad with his hands and he had hepatitis. And 10 of us caught hepatitis. And I collapsed at work and I went to I ended up in the hospital. And my doctor at the time said, Bill, if you have a drink again, you'll die. Your liver is fucked. Excuse me. I hope I can say that on the podcast, but anyway, it's okay. I didn't drink for a year and a half. I smoked a lot of pot, but I didn't drink. And I'd go to recovery meetings and sit in the back high. And I was out on a date and they asked me what I wanted to drink. And I said a Perrier with a lime. They tapped me on the shoulder, handed me a Heineken. And I went out for another 10 years until 1997. And then got into coke and some crack and a little heroin. And, and it's that insidious that it can happen that quickly. So when I think about, I want that life back. No, I don't. That life was horrible. I made a lot of money. I had a lot of power, but I mean, I'm lucky I made it through the AIDS epidemic. I mean, I'm fine. So I have to just remember that's not who I am today. Life is about progression. Been there, done that. What's next? And it's not easy. None of this is easy. It's a practice, and we're not doing it. The key thing is when people think, and I've had friends that have gone through this, I can outthink that disease. I can control it. I can have a couple drinks here and there. I've got a friend right now. She's 65 years old, and now she's having a problem with alcohol. She's been through 2 divorces, and they found her on the kitchen floor. She doesn't remember 2 weeks. The doctors showed her an MRI of her brain, and I never thought she had a drinking problem. And they said, look at your brain. It's shrinking from the alcohol. And just the other day, and she had said to me, I'm never going to touch it again. Just the other day, Bill, I can have a glass of wine if I want to. And and all of her relatives were like, you got to call Bill because I've been sober so long. And I said to her, you sound like people that I know that are still using. And she's now in that place of denial. And denial is more than a river in Egypt. It's a bad joke. Sorry.
I am interested in something you spoke about though, which is kind of the identity shift. Do you know, you obviously said no, had a good corporate job, you were partying all the time and things like that. And you then mentioned whenever I asked you about what were people's other opinions, you saying that those friends that you had were maybe didn't understand why you were quitting. They thought it was a great time. But how did you deal with that identity shift from an alcoholic, I drink now with these people, I make all this money, to what you are, to where you ended up at, like, I'm sober, I'm not going back to do that again?
I chose my life over the partying. That's really what it came down to. I chose my life over the booze. I know people that have chosen the booze over relationships, over love. They chose the bottle. It's a choice. And like I said, I didn't do it alone. I had to become vulnerable. I'd sit in these recovery groups. I cried for probably the first 6 months. And the old timers would be like, oh, he's crying again. Jesus. Because I got sober in Boston. You get sober in Boston and they sit you down and their main theme is take the cotton out of your ears and stuff it in your mouth and just listen. So I only had to release a couple friends when I quit drinking. And one of them, who was the biggest drunk of all, she literally said to me, Bill, I get it. I understand. She was like 6'6", this huge black woman who would get hammered at every party. And she ran a daycare. It's crazy. Just like, what the hell are you doing, lady? But she was sweet, and she made sure the kids were okay. But God, she waited right as soon as they left. She was hitting the bottle. And it's hard to hold up a 6'6" woman when you're coming out of a bar, But that's what it was. I made a different choice. And I tell everybody who is sober when they're feeling down and life has given them, a kick in the stomach or whatever. We're miracles. We are miracles. It's not easy to get clean and sober. I feel for every addict and alcoholic out there who hasn't found the solution, and the solution is right in front of them. It's just surrender. I call it SAG. That's the acronym. Surrender, acceptance, and gratitude. You have to accept that you have an issue. You can call it alcoholic. You can call it whatever you want. Some people won't use that word. They don't like it. So they're like, I have an allergic reaction to alcohol. If you're diabetic, you can't be eating a big cake. It's the same thing. It's poison to our bodies. And one other thing it does for anyone who's listening, it eats the hip bones and it shrinks your brain. And if you get wet brain, you're done. You don't come back from wet brain. That means it's done. The brain has been damaged. So, I just say that to anyone who's thinking about, get a physical, get checked out. And the most important thing, and I haven't even said this yet. Oh my God. The whole key to the whole damn thing, keep it in today. Just live one day at a time. Because think about it. I'm 28 years. I could walk out after this podcast and get hit by a bus. Unlikely in my neighborhood, but, I'm just saying, tomorrow is really, we don't have it. It's not real yet. Today is the only reality. Yesterday is not reality anymore. It's gone. It's the past. It's over. It's just today. So if you're trying to get clean and sober, keep it in 24 hours. And some people keep it in the hour, in the minute, and it passes. And then you continue on, and then you just rinse and repeat tomorrow.
Deion Sanders has a great quote for that. He says that if you worry too much about tomorrow, you'll miss today like you missed yesterday. And it's so good. I always think about it. It's such a perfect way to say it too.
It just is. And we get so caught up in, oh, my bucket list, please, get a life and keep that life in today, because, it's nice to want to do things like my spiritual leader says, walk in the direction of your goal, but not with a furrowed brow. So it means you can have, goals and things, but when you put too much emphasis on it's got to look like this, then that's your ego controlling it when the universe or God or whatever you believe in might have something even better for you in store. We just don't always see it because our egos wants to paint this specific picture.
I've
It's
got one
crazy.
last question about the quitting process before I go on to some reflection questions. But I've always been fascinated with this with other people that are coming over addiction because obviously, like, I've told my story a million times in this show, but I repeatedly talked about how whenever I was kind of like overcome mental health, I had so many times where I like kind of made the decision to get better without fully committing to it because I never actually thought it could happen. You know what I mean? Like you get to the point where you're trying to do better things, but you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's just something I've always wanted to ask someone who went through addiction. What was the moment that you actually sat down and realized I can actually quit this? So this is how I can actually do it. Because you mentioned how you fell back on the wagon a few times.
Yeah, I mean, it all changed in 97 because I put myself in the middle of the pack. That's the key, is that you put yourself in the middle of the pack. If you're on the outskirts, you're going to get picked off, and that's what happens is that the disease picks off the people that are on the outskirts because we get into that stinking thinking again. So I had to submerge myself in. I listened to someone who took me through, I'm just going to say it, the 12 steps, and that shifted my entire life. And then it was being of service as much as possible, whether it was in recovery or outside of it. I started volunteering at soup kitchens in Boston, which, if you're homeless in Boston, that's not a good thing in the winter. So I worked in the soup kitchens, I worked in animal shelters, wherever I was asked to be of service. I think it even says, when all else fails, help another person. And that to me is the key because then we get out of that self will. It's not about us. I heard someone the other day say, I asked him how they were doing it, and he said, I'm just not listening to myself today. And I went, what an interesting comment. He goes, I've stopped listening to myself because the chatter, the monkey mind is not real. It's just thoughts. It's like I do a meditation. I haven't done it in a while, but where I would be sitting at the Charles River in Boston. I've been in LA for like 24 years, but I still visualize. I look, I'm wearing a Red Sox hat. I still miss Boston. But I would be sitting on the edge of the Charles River and just let the thoughts go by in the river and then take one out and look at it and put it back in and let it continue to go because meditation, people will say it's quieting the mind. No, it's not. The thoughts are going to keep coming. It's that we understand that they don't have to mean anything unless we give them meaning. A belief is a thought that I keep thinking. So then change the thought. And I know people be like, well, how do you do that? It's a matter of, for me, it's prompts of, no, that's a lie. That's not who I really am. Or I call someone like my sponsor, members of my spiritual posse is what I call them. I'm having this thought. Does this make sense? 90% of the time, they're like, no, Bill, that doesn't make sense. Like, Bill, you don't want to do that, you know? And it's that type of thing. We can't just rely on our thinking because that's what got us into this place in the first place. That's what got us deep into the addiction. And that's why it really is. It's we. It's not I. And I know that might sound, once again, well, that's easy to say, Bill. No, it's not easy. You got to make an effort, but you have to be willing to realize that just because you're thinking it doesn't mean it's the truth about who you are. It's habit. I have a friend, he's got like 35 years. He blames his family for everything. Guy does no gratitude. He does no service. And I can't even listen to him anymore. It's like, stop blaming other people for your issues. It's the past. It happened. Process it. Put it in the right place. Doesn't mean you're not going to be angry about something or that you wish that didn't happen, but it did. So you learn how to process it and then you got to move forward because if you don't, then you're letting it drag you down. That's the issue. It's just because I'm thinking this doesn't mean it's real. And that's why I need other people to tell me, Bill, you're okay. Let's look at it this way. I'll end with this in regards to this question. It's like a photographer. If they take a camera and they hold it over a flower directly over it, and they shift that camera just a little bit to the right, they have a whole different perception. And that's the same thing with recovery. It's that you have to shift your perception just a little bit. And then that's when you have a shift.
So I have one last question for you. And I always like to leave the episode with something that we can both walk away thinking about, and hopefully the audience will walk away thinking about too. So my question for you is, do you ever miss it? Is there a guy in you that still wants that party life, or is he locked out of the building forever?
Oh, the party life's gone. It doesn't make any sense. Like I literally was walking down Santa Monica Boulevard on Friday night, and it's gay pride out here. And it's, I don't know, 15 bars packed with people. Everyone's drinking. Everyone's on the street. It's like Mardi Gras. All right. I mean, it's that intense, and the music's loud, and, everybody. And I thought for a minute, God, everyone in there is drinking and everyone's doing this and this. And I did that. This would have been me. And then I thought, in the recovery groups, it's all the same people. They're just not in the bars. And now the conversations actually make sense, So it's like, think about, if you go into a bar with your friends and you're debating on it, just don't drink for that night and then listen to their conversations. They're just ridiculous. And that's when I've turned around and gone, I'm going home. And it can be lonely in the beginning, and that's why you need to be of service. So no, that life, I mean, I love to go. If I'm going with friends, I like being in the energy of a club, but then I know when it's time to leave. It's like the noise gets to a certain level, and the people falling down, and someone just threw up on my shoe. I'm going to probably, I'd rather be home reading a book or going to the movies or whatever it is that I do.
Incredible. Bo, where can people find you? What have you got out at the moment, and what have you got coming out in the future?
Sure. I have a movie. I spoke to my distributor last week. I pray it's in the UK now. It's supposed to be on some YouTube channels in the UK. It's called Paradise, A Town of Sinners and Saints. It's based on a stage production that had 2 long runs in LA and at the Austin Playhouse in Texas. It's irreverent, it's fun and heartwarming bluegrass musical comedy. So that's a little crazy, and it's so much fun. And then I have a book called Uncle Bill's Animal Tales, Life Lessons for Adults, that is about my experience with animals, that I feel that they're our greatest teachers and healers. And that's on Amazon. Uncle Bill's Animal Tales, Life Lessons for Adults. My last name is Robertson, if you need to find me, because there is another Uncle Bill book, but it was written like 10 years ago, and it's not me. And it's not a book for children. Some would be okay with it, but it's not like a children's book. I wrote it. It looks like, I wanted it to look like a book for children, but was for adults. And you'll see that on the cover. It's kind of cool. I actually hired somebody from the UK on Fiverr who did my graphics and did my book covers. So, but to find me, I'm on Facebook, Instagram. We do have Paradise the Movie is on Facebook and on Instagram. We have also a YouTube channel, which I believe is called Paradise the Movie. I don't handle that part, but that's where you can find me. And of course, the book I know is available in the UK. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I hope to have 2 more films in production before the end of 2026, but we'll see what happens.